What's up, everyone? It's your boy Shaft, aka That Mill Guy, here with another kind of talking head video going over some of the things that us mill players need to have to go into this perilous next step in Modern. From the last video that I put out on the channel, you can understand my feelings going into this meta with no changes happening in Modern right now, with the format being healthy, but look, I'm past that. I'm still upset about it, but we're using this video as a call to action. As the title and the thumbnail suggests, we are going to be discussing 5 cards that I need your help with testing. I need these cards to start being played in Modern decks to see the effect that it can have, okay? And we really need to get past personal bias. And this is going to be tough for a lot of people, just because, again, if you're not in a situation like me where you have a little bit more time for Magic, have a couple more resources available to you, then you might not have the time to test it. But I encourage you to at least try 1 or 2 of these cards. You might see a change in how you're approaching this meta. And a big reason why we want to have this discussion is right now, Mill is in a pretty bad spot in the Modern metagame. It's having a really tough time dealing with the mid-range decks and just every card, drawing a card and doing everything and whatnot. Mill's having a hard time keeping up. So there's some concepts that I think it's time for us to explore and push to the next level, get past our own ideals, and really try these cards, okay? It doesn't matter what's tried and true, because Mill isn't up there right now in terms of the competitive scene, and so we need to head back to the drawing board, okay, with some things and some cards. So let's hop right into it. We're going to get a special mention in as well, and we're just going to really talk about this list one at a time here. So first and foremost, with the special mention, this is going to be kind of 6 cards, so I'm cheating a little bit here. We're going to talk about Remand. So this is a card that's already seeing play right now, and a big reason for this is with Sodek's friend Wisnia doing really well in recent Modern challenges with this. A lot of people picking up this list as well, or a similar style of this list. And the concept of this is just to go a little bit faster than what the Modern metagame has right now. And user The Asian Kid recently did really well with the Demir list. Again, very similar to what's going on in terms of what Wisnia has been doing. But again, 6th place Modern challenge, top 8. Again, shouting out to Wisnia here, but the Asian Kid doing pretty well here as well. Now, with this specifically, the reason we want to talk about Remand is it helps us accelerate through our game plan and find more spells, give us that 1 extra turn. So it's a different concept from Drown, which is a resolute, solid answer, both on the stack and off the stack when the spell has resolved. But Remand counters a spell, and even if you can't counter the spell, the draw card text is separate from the counter text. So even if you go to counter a spell that is uncounterable thanks to Veil of Summer, or not Veil of Summer, I should say Dovin's Veto, because Veil of Summer provides hexproof, or something through Cavern of Souls, you can still draw the card. So you can still cast this card. It's not really dead in many scenarios, and you can just keep cycling through your deck to find more cards. So a card like this is actually really powerful, easier on the mana base as well, because the Mill deck is very blue based now, right? Historically, many players have been complaining about, oh, what Field of Ruin does to our mana base, and well, hey, here's a easier spell that is, again, easier to cast. You don't have to go through the pain of maybe fetch shocking a Watery Grave out to cast a Drown Unlock, casting a Remand. So this is a card that I really want to try in terms of lists that are going to try and hit a certain metagame call, going up against especially decks like Murktide Region. Imagine remanding a Murktide Region. You can't really drown a turn 2 Murktide Region because they're going to take out all the cards out of their graveyard. You can remand a turn 2 Murktide Region though, and that's a pretty big play, turning off their Dragon's Rage Channelers, as well as stopping the turn 3 Murktide, because they're not going to have a graveyard if you know how to control yourself and have some patience. But that's Remand. That's my spiel on it. Next up, we're going to have at number 5, so starting our kind of official list here, Mesmeric Orb. Now, I'm looking at a lot of the 5-0 list right now. I know a big proponents of this are going to be in the Mill Discord. Mesmeric Orb has been super helpful against the slower decks in the current Modern metagame right now, and that's going to be decks such as Blue-White Control, the Yorian Blink decks. This is going to be a great card to bring back, a card that historically, for many of you longtime Mill players, we have been main boarding. We've pushed out of our main board. Some people have slowly been trying it in our main boards. I'm not sure how I feel about it in the main board, but again, the concept of this video is pushing past our own biases, so I'm definitely going to be trying this in the main board. against certain matchups to see how that goes. Now, when you take it to a league perspective, I'm not sure if main board is where you want it. It's a very good sideboard piece, but if you're in a competitive sense where you're trying to out yourself, create an out against Zoria's control decks and blink decks that you think are going to be very relevant, main board actually might be really good, especially against, again, something like Azorius Control, even though they do have answers such as Teferi Time Raveler, which is going to be there as a 4 of. It still gets around Chalice of the Void. It's still going to get around, the mana taxing, the Spreading Seas. It doesn't get hit by Solitude. A lot of pluses and minuses to it. It's really only Teferi Time Raveler that's going to get it. So once it's resolved, it's going to stay there. It can't even be gotten by Archmage's Charm. It's 2 CMC, not 1. And then if you look at a sideboard for a deck list like this, again, Celestial Purge doesn't hit it. Dovin's Veto sure hits it, but they have to counter it, right? That's counter mana that they have to hold up. Dress Down doesn't hit it. So again, a lot of promising things going on when you're trying to use a spell like Mesmeric Orb to eke out wins. So I think this is a card that we need to see come back, at least as a 2 of in our main boards and sideboards, as a thing to test. Not enough people are playing Mesmeric Orb at all. At number 4, the card that I want to mention is going to be Portable Hole. Now, this is going to be tech coming out of Wisnia's list, and the big reason I want to mention this is now that Lurrus is here to stay, we got to find new tech. Now, Esper Mill is obviously a very solid strategy in terms of the modern mill sphere right now, with things like Prismatic Ending and Kaya's Guile, and we have other sideboard pieces that can help them kind of help us beat the modern metagame, even trying out Rest in Pieces there, good spells against burn, whatnot. But Portable Hole is going to be a fantastic way to further take advantage of something like Lurrus, where in my current Dimir build, or not current, I should say, I'm testing some other things. In one of my more recent Dimir builds, I've been trying out Mishra's Baubles, and unfortunately Mishra's Baubles are still here in the format, so why not further take advantage of that with Portable Hole? Now, this obviously has a lower ceiling. If we're going to use the floor ceiling analogy that many people use for Magic card evaluation, the ceiling, the tip top, is a lot lower than Prismatic Ending. You're not hitting 3 CMC permanents, you're not hitting 4 CMC permanents, and the nuts, you're not hitting 5 CMC permanents. But for a lot cheaper, you are hitting 1 and 2, and you don't require multiple colors. So that's the key there, right? You don't have to spend 2 mana to hit a 2 CMC permanent. You can just use 1 to hit that. And again, just like Prismatic Ending, this is going to be hitting any non-land permanent. Planeswalkers, creatures, artifacts, enchantments, very relevant against cards like Wrenn and 6, very relevant against cards like Colossus Hammer, any creature in that deck, any creature in Wrenn and 6 decks, most of the time, outside of Blink. But again, a card like this, recurring value, once it goes, you can still get it back through the graveyard. And the reason I want to bring this up is additional removal. Now, this is going to be very important because the Lurrus decks are still here to stay. We still have the Colossus Hammer deck. We still have Grixis Dead Shadow. We still have the Zoomer Jund decks right now with Ragavan, with Dragon's Rage Chandler. So you do need more than 4 Fatal Push, 4 Drown in the Lock, whatever it might be. You need cards out of your sideboard that can help tempo better. If they're playing 1 CMC threats, playing a 2 CMC removal spell and a Drown in the Lock, it kind of sucks in terms of tempo. So you really need to make sure that you have access to an answer that's on tempo. So I wanted to really take a look at the modern metagame again, just highlighting the cards and the decks that this is going to work against. Death Shadow, Hammer Time, Jund, Prowess for sure. Can be relevant against other strategies kind of lower in the list here if we kind of go to view more decks. Not so much against like Mill and Burn and stuff like that, but exiling cards against Dredge can be relevant once they get those out. Exiling things like things out of Boros midrange, Hardened Scales. If these are some of the off-meta decks that you're seeing, it's going to be very fantastic against that. So again, extra removal against a deck like Grixis Death Shadow, where even a Croxa, once you exile that out, they're gonna have a very hard time dealing with it. Even though they have Kolaghan's Command, again, it's really just gonna be Kolaghan's Command. They're only playing 1 to 2 copies in the main board. Once in the game 2 scenario, they might even bring in 2 to 3, whatever. But once that's gone, usually you're going to have the remand, you're going to have the Drown in the Lock for that 3 CMC card, such as Kolaghan's Command, that deals with this. So let's go. Let's get some more removal in there, because we need a way to tackle this modern metagame. We need to change some of the ways that we're thinking. We can't be trying to answer every single deck in terms of a competitive sense. We can do that at a 5.0 level and at an LGS level, at a league level. You can't do that in a competitive sense. We got to try and hone in our answers, try and work with some of our worst matchups. So at number 3, the next thing is going to be similar to Portable Hole. I want to bring up Bloodchief's Thirst. Now, Portable Hole is going to be for those people that are playing Azorius, have access to white, playing Esper, have access to white. Bloodchief's Thirst is, I think, going to be another card that we can bring in, and there's some other cards in here that we could think about in terms of playing extra removal. The reason I like Bloodchief's Thirst is, even though it's sorcery speed, it has the optionality of just being able to kill any threat and also being 1 mana. And I think that's the big thing, right? At the end of the day, it's 1 mana. It is very similar to a tempo swing of Fatal Push. It obviously doesn't have the instant speed aspect to it, but again, for 1 mana, like Portable Hole, you're able to create, you're able to kill those 2 seamless creatures and planeswalkers. Again, very relevant for Ren and 6. But then in the late game, when you top deck it, you're going to be able to pay 4 to kill something like a Jace the Mind Sculptor, a 5 Fairy, or something as big as a Solitude. You have the option for that. So I really like this as a sideboard piece, not only against the Grixis Death Shadow matchup, the Hammer matchup, but again, giving you the flexibility against control, against blink. So these are the type of cards that I think we need to bring back in, because we need to focus on beating the bad matchups. They're here to stay. We can't wait for a BNR. We know that because a BNR just happened, it's not going to happen for a little while, so we need to get creative. And I think we need to bring in cards like Portable Hole and Bloodchief's Thirst in our sideboard as 2 to 3 copies, realistically. And this is what I'm trying out right now. If 4 Fatal Push is not enough, you need to be able to answer that Ragavan on turn 1. And not only that, they're going to have a follow-up to that Ragavan. They're going to have a Tarmogoyf after. They're going to have a Dragon's Rage Channeler after. What are you going to do against that? What's going to happen when they dash in a Ragavan and you already used up all your spells? Well, you're going to hopefully try and use the Bloodchief's Thirst early and then save that Fatal Push that you would have been forced to use then for that dash in Ragavan, right? So these are the type of things that we have to think about. How do we eke out as much advantage as we can against a metagame that's working against us? Again, like how do we get some control back in the current modern metagame? That's what we're trying to do right now. And that's, again, what I was trying to highlight with Jund. Being able to answer every single permanent in this deck other than the artifact. So I'm talking about, planeswalkers and the creatures. Even Lurrus, the Bloodchief's Thirst is going to be able to answer on the high end, right? So Ren and 6, Turok, protection from white. Not relevant because, hey, Portable Hole doesn't answer that, but guess what? Bloodchief's Thirst does. So that's what, being in Dimir gives you access to. Tarmogoyf, Kroxa. Even though it kills Kroxa, that's the trade-off you're getting with Portable Hole, right? So they can answer with the permanent, but it is an exile. It's not a kill trigger. They don't have access to it in graveyard for types and, stuff like that. But again, Elvish Reclaimer, Ragavan, all that stuff. It's going to be able to answer all this. So let's play more removal. And number 2, this is where things are going to get a little bit interesting, and I'm really interested to see what your take is on number 1 especially. But number 2 is going to be Trapmaker's Snare. Now, the big reason why I want to promote everyone to try and bring this card back, or I should say bring this card to the forefront first and foremost, because I don't know if this card has really ever seen the light of day in terms of a competitive modern metagame. So Trapmaker's Snare is really interesting when you think about it from a perspective of a tutor. So Trapmaker's Snare, in large part, has been a meme. You search your library for a trap card, primarily Archive Trap, which is what we're going to get into, and you just put it in your hand. So it's a way to accelerate through the game. So this is similar to what we were talking about with Remand, which is already being played in the modern metagame right now, as a way to accelerate through your strategy. So if you're up against a greedy mana-based type of deck, such as Yorian, Blink, Jund, Zoomer Jund, any one of the multiple color mana bases that usually fold relatively easy to Blood Moon, they're usually searching pretty actively. Trapmaker Snare is going to be a great way to get your archive traps, put them in your hand, and as well create utility out of some of the other traps that I wanted to go into as well, helping us expand some of the tools that Modern Mill can have and expanding your mental toolbox into some of the things that you could bring into to add some personal flavor. Trapmaker Snare being a gateway into some of the kind of multiple pieces of multiple cards and optionalities that Modern Mill can have. So first and foremost, if we just do a Scryfall search of the types of traps, this is going to be a primarily kind of old Zendikar mechanic. I really wish they brought this back. They brought some of the Commander products as well. I really wish they brought these back, but they unfortunately did it. I think, unfortunately for Wizards, it was a big missed opportunity, but that's fine. You see a pretty big plethora of, pretty mixed through. You have some blues, reds, like every color has a trap. And I want to go through some of the ones that are relatively important, that could see some play, that could see some work through, and then some of the traps that I think that us as mill players should be playing. So first and foremost, Archive Trap. You're playing 4 of these. You're playing mill in Modern. You got 4 of these. I don't need to explain. You know what's going on. The next one, and again, this isn't really a trap I'm asking you to play. I'm saying keep this in the back of your mind. This is a condition that could be met at some point. So if an opponent gained life this turn, you may pay black rather than play the whole thing's mana cost. Target player loses 5 life and you gain 5 life. Right, so, and I'm really looking at this from not the lose 5 life, but the gain 5 life in black. So an instant speed way for you to pay 1 and just gain 5 life in black, which might be useful in Dimir. We're obviously playing things like Crypt Incursion, but that's big against the creature decks. We play things like the 1 mana artifact whenever you mill a card, and if it's a creature, you gain life. Like, that's for creature decks. This could be a cool way for us to gain life when our opponent's gaining life, if there ever comes out a deck that's conditionally gaining life for something. Obviously, Soul Sisters is a bit of a meme at the LGS level, not competitive. But if something like that ever comes up, keep Needlebite Trap in the back of our mind. It's in mill colors. So this could be something for Trapmaker's Snare. Next up is Mindbreak Trap. This is going to be a spell that has historically seen play in Modern Mill, when Storm has been a good deck in the format as a way to pay 0, exile all cards. This was a fun little one-up in the sideboard. A really cool trap. Again, this is something to remind players of what this card is. Remember that this is an option. Obviously not that great in the current Modern metagame based on the type of combos that are relevant in the format, the type of combos that are being powered up by Wizards and the current set design. But again, if you're playing Trapmaker Snare, this is the type of options you get that you have access to. You play 2 to 3, 1 to 2 copies of Trapmaker Snare. These are the type of things that you get post board. You play main board for the Archive Traps, post board you get things like Mindbreaker's Trap and Needlebite Trap. And then finally, Ravenous Trap is going to be the big one. This is the reason why I think we should be trying out things like this is the reason why I think we should be trying out things like Trapmaker Snare. Now, the tough call for this is that graveyards right now, again, are a value place. They're an extension of your deck, not an extension of your hand. What do I mean by that? Well, you're not really casting cards out of your graveyard. They're essentially there. They're not an extension of your hand because you're not bringing cards out like with Dredge. You're not casting flashback spells. You're not doing any of that. It's kind of like they're an extension of your graveyard. So it's kind of like they're there. You see their types. You're able to use them. But you're not really casting that spell, so you have things like Delirium, you have Delve, like taking advantage of the graveyard, but as a value piece. So that's where Ravenous Trap's going to be a little bit tough. But I think this is a cool option, because I think if you're going to be playing Trapmaker Snare, you should be playing multiple traps so you can take advantage of it. It should not just be for Archive Trap, because you need that optionality, remembering that all these traps are instant speed. They do allow you to take advantage of certain conditions that a lot of them, if you look at some of the red ones and some of the white ones, some of the red ones have historically been played in Modern as really big staples. Some of the white ones are pretty relevant to 4 mil as well. So look through these traps. Really encourage you to play Trapmaker Snare, again, as a way, similar to what we were talking about with Remand, to accelerate your mill plan, to just mill more, be faster than what our opponent's trying to do, because it seems like in a competitive sense, it's hard to be the interactive deck these days, because our spells don't say mill this much and draw a card. Whereas our opponents, it seems like, oh, this permanent enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and you get to fix your mana perfectly. Oh, you play Ren and 6, enters the battlefield, and you technically draw a card. You draw a land out, and you have perfect mana. So it's hard to be able to interact with stuff like that. So we need to be able to eke out value out of the individual cards that we're playing. So Trapmaker Snare is going to be interesting for that. Finally, the last card that I want to talk about, I think this is the #1 card that many mill players should be trying out right now. And for a very good reason. I'm going to be trying out as well, and I think this is concept, right? This is I'm thinking through my mind conceptually. This card could be really good, and I think it might be finally its time. Into the Story. Now hear me out. Look. Into the Story has historically been a meme. It's a 4 mana spell at instant speed, and that's a very big ask in Modern, right? In a format dominated at the bottom end, right? With all those 1 drops, all those 2 drops, as a format dominated so hard at the bottom end. How do we play Into the Story? Well, obviously the condition is easy enough to meet. We don't have to hit the 20 like we do with Visions of Beyond. Just 7 cards. A lot of times the Murktide decks and the Dragon's Rage Chandler decks, they got 4 or 5 whatever cards in their graveyard to meet Delirium. Not that far off with just 1 Hedron Crab trigger. You probably got there with Into the Story. You're drawing 4 cards. The reason I want to bring this up is one of the tougher matchups for Mill right now is going to be Yorian, right? The Yorian Blink decks, the Yorian Elementals decks. And this is really going to be because of the type of control that they're playing, the type of mid-range that they're playing, that I think a deck like this or a card like this can be very, very, very relevant in terms of raw cards, just having access to raw resources. Because just 4 mana for 4 cards, pretty damn good, right? Like, if you really think about it in terms of per mana value, 1 mana for a card, not bad. When you talk about 4 mana for 4 cards at instant speed, you untap, you have 5 cards in your hand. It's like you have a whole new grip. Resources like that are very important against the Yorian decks. If you look at a list right now, this is a list that went 7-0 in one of the recent challenges, the format challenges on January 8th here. The big count, like, if we look at this list right now, 2 counter spells, 2 force negations. Post board, they have things like, Veil of Summer, Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm is pretty problematic. 1 mana counter for, a 7 mana spell. It's pretty big tempo, but that is in lower amounts. Again, Veil of Summer doesn't really interact with us that way. And again, just the 2 force negations, just the 2 counter spells. The rest of it is all just dealing with the board, right? Fury Solitude deals with your crabs, right? Omnath does some life damage, but is there for ramp and everything. And imagine if they use some resources just to, stop your end of the story. Oh wait, it doesn't actually stop into the story. You've already paid for the reduced cost of into the story to get it out, pay for it. The endurance does nothing, so you're getting that draw for past the endurance, so that's pretty sweet there. Let's look at another list. So this one is going to be playing 4 counter spells, so this is going to be a little harder of a push. But wait, they don't have force negation. It's kind of like they have the same number of counter spells, right? Now obviously it's a little bit different. Force negation is 3, it can be free, whatever, but I think on average it evens out. Again, they only have the 4 counter spells. They have the Teferi, but that's not a counter spell. You can still cast into the story on your turn. They have 3 force negations, but again, Veil of Summer, that doesn't stop us. Not casting into the stories. You want raw resources. They cast Veil of Summer. Okay, I'm going to cast into the story. I'm just going to untap with 5 cards. 4 cards plus draw. I'm just going to untap with 5 cards. So in terms of raw cards, right? Like now we're slowly starting to see something here, right? Right. The resources that I'm trying to push here. And again, finally, the last list, like they got a Valky in here. No counter spells. No counter spells at all. This is more like an Elementals, like Blink. They got Renegade Rallier. This is a little bit spicier. But out of the sideboard, Aether Gust, Veil of Summer, does not stop us. You start to see that these Yorian decks, a little bit of variety. Some have multiple counter spells, some have none. So if they're not able to stop into the story, you see how drawing multiple cards a turn can actually start to make up for the value that things like not Utopia Sprawl, I should say, but cards like Abundant Growth have. Fix their mana, draw a card. Cards like Spreading Seas has stop us and draw a card, right? Like mess with our mana and draw a card. We start to make up for that value over the long term. And that's really the hardest thing about matchups like this against the Yorian decks. You tend to run out of resources. Oh, okay, they have so many cards in the library. They have 80 cards in the library. You mill them for 2 Archive Traps and a Hedron Crab. You play 2 lands, and all of a sudden you pretty much just have no cards in hand, right? Like you cast 2 Archive Traps, you play a land, you play a crab. Hey, you got like 2-3 cards left in your hand. That's not a lot. And then your opponents staring you down with 6 cards, 7 cards left in their hand, right? So this is a resource battle. This is about getting raw cards. This is about having more resources because you do have enough cards to mill out the Yorian deck. And I don't need to convince you of that. You mill players already know that. We can mill out these Yorian players. It's just about having those cards. So instead of playing these individual cards like Spreading Seas and Abundant Growth, why not just play cards like Into the Story to give us raw card advantage? And I think in the main board, this could be a fun one of. And then in the sideboard, you could also keep it as a one of and just bring it in against control, against Yorian, and say that if you resolve this spell, you win the game. You're going to have so many resources. You're going to have access to so many cards that you're going to outvalue anything that these decks can put up against you. So this is going to be a card that I really, really would like to see a lot more milled players test out. One in the main board, one in the sideboard, and see where it takes you against the Yorian matchup. Now, this is going to be a very tough call against someone that's at an LGS or 5 level, but at a competitive level, I really encourage you to test against these decks with Into the Story. Now, I want to end off this video by giving you that disclaimer, repeating that disclaimer. A lot of these cards that I want you to try out, similar to the rant that I had in the last video, are really only applicable in a competitive sense. If you want to be trying to take your mill deck to the next level, playing these challenges, playing paper tournaments and big ones, I think these are the cards that you want to try and test out and see how you can beat these difficult decks that are very relevant, that are in very high percentages in the current modern metagame, and how you can use them to beat mill and whatnot. So, or sorry, not beat mill, use them to beat these decks. But in a 5-0 and an LGS level, stay to the Drown Lock, stay to the Surgical Plan, keep interacting. You might not have to be faster, because in a lot of ways, those metagames are very varied, right? It's very varied. It's hard to find a one card fits all. You need to have every answer, because sometimes you just come up against real wild cards, especially in the modern league. Sometimes you go to your LJS after 2 weeks and there's new players there and all that stuff. It's hard to gauge what's going on in the tables, so you need to have answers to everything. Whereas in a competitive sense, people are a little bit more honed in. So I really encourage you, check out these 6 cards and let me know how you're doing. You're obviously going to be seeing my testing on the streams on Twitch, but let me know what you think of the cards I mentioned. And we're going to end off the video there. Remember that even the impossible is possible. And as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll check me out next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.